Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And may the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
So I want you to imagine for a second that you are pushed to your absolute agonizing psychological breaking point. Like the government in your country has suddenly decided that your core beliefs are totally illegal and, well, they want you dead.
Right, a complete nightmare scenario.
Exactly. And then, imagine a totally different scenario. You hit the ultimate financial jackpot. Your bank account inflates to the billions, but you slowly realize it is just rotting your soul from the inside out.
Which is a whole different kind of terror, honestly.
Oh, for sure. Now, imagine everything you thought was perfectly logical and just in the world, your entire worldview is suddenly turned upside down right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
And finally, imagine you were just abruptly handed the keys to a global empire with totally uncontested military and technological supremacy.
That is a lot to wrap your head around for one deep dive.
It is. But today, we are opening up this 1,400-year-old blueprint that is explicitly designed to help you survive exactly those four scenarios. We are plunging into the four central narratives of Surah Al-Kahf.
And, blueprint really is the exact right word to use here, because people have this terrible habit of reading ancient texts like they are wandering through a museum.
Yeah, like it's just a dusty old exhibit.
Right. They look at the stories of past nations, nod their heads, and think, oh, look what happened to those poor folks a long time ago. But these narratives actively reject being treated as static history.
They really do. They feel incredibly alive.
They form a cohesive, interlocking, and highly dynamic survival guide. They are engineered to anchor you against the most destructive forces a human being can face.
Which are?
Systemic oppression, out-of-control materialism, intellectual arrogance, and the kind of deep societal deception that leaves you totally disoriented.
I was actually obsessing over the structure of these stories all week. And the best way I can visualize it for you, for the listener, is to compare it to a modern aerospace engineering stress test.
Oh, I like that. A stress test.
Yeah, because when a company like Boeing or Airbus designs a new airplane wing, they don't just put in a wind tunnel, look at it and say, yeah, it looks good to me.
No, they have to push it.
Exactly. They strap that wing to these massive hydraulic machines. They bend it, they twist it, they push that metal to its absolute screaming breaking point. They apply maximum pressure to see exactly what snaps and exactly what holds firm.
That is a phenomenal analogy, because that is precisely what Surah Al-Kahf is doing to the human soul. It is a literal spiritual stress test.
So how does it break that down?
Well, it divides the human experience into four core vulnerabilities, and then it pushes each one to the absolute limit. First, we have the trial of faith, which is explored through the young men known as the people of the cave.
Okay, the cave. Got it.
Then, the trial of wealth, demonstrated by the really arrogant owner of the two gardens. Third is the trial of knowledge, which is this incredibly intense, reality-bending encounter between Prophet Moses and a figure named Al-Qidr.
That one always breaks my brain a little bit.
Oh, it's supposed to. And finally, the trial of power, explored through the global geopolitical leadership of Dhul Qarnayn.
Wait, so you're saying this isn't just like a history lesson or a collection of random parables. It's a literal diagnostic tool for the modern mind.
Exactly. It asks you directly, what happens to you when your faith is hunted by the state? What happens when your wealth is absolutely flawless? What happens when your brilliant intellect hits a brick wall of divine paradox? And what happens when you are handed total uncontested power?
Okay, well, let's jump right into the fire with that first scenario. We are starting where humanity so often feels the most vulnerable and terrified, facing insurmountable lethal odds.
The trial of faith.
Right. This focuses on the people of the cave, spanning verses 9 through 26. And the core question here for you, listening to this right now, is this: how do you protect your inner compass when the entire society around you is not just unsupportive, but actively, physically toxic?
The narrative begins by immediately recalibrating how we, as humans, view the very concept of a miracle.
Because we usually think of miracles as magic tricks, right?
Pretty much. In verses 9 and 10, the text openly acknowledges that the physical preservation of these youths in a cave for over 3 centuries is a profound anomaly. But it highlights a really fascinating, almost tragic human flaw.
Which is?
We get totally enchanted by physical miracles. We want the bending of physics, the suspension of biology, the cinematic special effects. Yet we routinely overlook the daily, profound miracles of divine guidance, the rising of the sun, our own heartbeat.
It's so true. We want the blockbuster stuff. We want
Yeah.
the sea to split in half, but we completely ignore the miracle of water itself.
Precisely. But the youths in this story, they understood where the true miracle lay. When they sought refuge in that cave, yes, it was a physical act of fleeing persecution. But that physical retreat was just the outer shell of a massive internal reality.
The tawakkul.
Yes, it was the physical manifestation of their tawakkul, their absolute, unshakable reliance upon the divine.
Let's talk about that internal reality, because the psychological state of these young men is key. They possessed a highly refined fear. The Arabic term used is khawf.
Khawf, exactly. A very specific type of awe and fear.
Right, they had a fear of Allah alone. And what's wild is that this specific elevated vertical fear entirely neutralized their horizontal fear, meaning the fear of a tyrannical king and his army.
It completely wiped it out.
It's almost like a psychological equation. If fear A is absolute, fear B drops to zero.
That is exactly how it functions. Their khawf of the creator functioned as an immunological defense against the terror of the state. Because they feared losing their eternal soul more than they feared losing their temporal life, they made a deeply rational calculation.
Rational. Hiding in a dark cave seems crazy to most people.
Well, structurally rational. They realize that preserving their monotheism, their tawhid, in absolute isolation inside a dark, damp cave was infinitely better than losing their souls in the comfort and luxury of a corrupt, idolatrous city.
But notice what they actually ask for when they get to the cave.
What?
This is the part that really blew my mind.
Their prayer, right.
Yeah. They are fleeing a lethal, militarized threat. If it were me, I'm hiding in that cave praying for lightning bolts. I'm praying for the earth to open up and swallow the king's army. I want absolute destruction for my enemies.
That is the standard human reaction, for sure.
But they don't ask for military victory. They don't ask to become kings themselves. The text says they ask for just two things: Ramah, which is mercy, and Rashada, which is right guidance.
And that is a complete paradigm shift for anyone facing a crisis. They aren't trying to micromanage the universe. They aren't telling God how to defeat their enemies. They're asking for the internal fortitude to navigate the crisis correctly.
Which is so much harder to do.
It is. They want mercy to envelop and protect them, and guidance to show them the next right step. That is the pinnacle of spiritual maturity.
Which leads us directly to verses 11 and 12, where the divine intervention actually kicks in. And this is where the biology gets really interesting.
The physical sealing.
Yes. The text explicitly says that Allah cast over their ears. He sealed their hearing. And I was looking at this thinking, why the ears? Why not just say, He put them to sleep or close their eyes? What is the specific physiological significance of sealing the hearing?
It is incredibly precise. From a neurological standpoint, hearing is the primary sensory gateway that disrupts sleep. Even when your eyes are closed and the cave is pitch black, your ears are constantly, vigilantly monitoring the environment for threats.
That's why an alarm clock works, right? Your auditory cortex is still processing sound while you sleep.
Exactly. By specifically casting over their ears, the text is stating they were neurologically sealed off from the passage of time, the dripping of water, the howling wind, and the chaos of the outside world. It is the ultimate noise-canceling intervention.
Wow. But on a deeper spiritual level, it establishes this profound formula that I think everyone needs to internalize.
Yeah.
Think about the sequence of events here.
Right, map it out.
The youths ran. They fled the city. They hiked up a mountain. They found the cave. That is maximum human effort.
They didn't just sit in their living rooms waiting for a miracle.
Exactly. But human effort eventually hits a brick wall. It ends at the strict limit of human capability. They couldn't fight off an entire army. They couldn't survive in a barren cave indefinitely without food.
And that's the threshold.
Right. And the very moment their active physical effort maxes out, divine intervention takes over through total passivity. They go to sleep.
That is the absolute essence of tawakkul. There's a famous prophetic tradition. You tie your camel, and then you trust in God. You don't just leave the camel untied and say, oh, God will protect it.
Because that's just negligence.
Precisely. You exert maximum human agency. You do everything in your power, and then you surrender completely to divine decree. The active, exhausting sacrifice of fleeing is rewarded by the peaceful, passive salvation of sleep.
And we really shouldn't gloss over who these people actually were. Verses 13 through 18 strongly emphasize their youth.
Fidya, the young men.
Yeah, they weren't 80-year-old ascetics who had already lived full lives and decided to just withdraw from the world. They were young men.
Yeah.
And youth is that incredibly volatile period of life.
It is. You have boundless energy, your hormones are raging, you are deeply susceptible to peer pressure.
You are desperate for societal approval,
Yeah,
and the worldly desires are at their absolute peak.
exactly. And that makes their rebellion so much more spectacular. They harness the vitality and the fire of their youth to stand against a dominant, oppressive culture.
The text uses the word kwamu, right?
Yes, meaning they stood up. This wasn't a secret, whisper in the shadows kind of faith. To save their own lives, they could have easily just hidden their beliefs. They could have compromised, paid lip service to the idols, and kept their faith private.
Just blended in.
But no, they stood up and openly declared orthodox monotheism right in the face of state-sponsored pressure.
That takes a terrifying level of courage, both intellectual courage to break from the mob and physical courage to face the executioner.
And because they made that physical stand, the text says Allah made firm their hearts. It's an internal anchor. The Arabic phrase is rabatna ala kulubihim.
Rabatna. It sounds heavy.
It literally implies a tight binding or tying down of the heart. Imagine a ship tied to a massive iron cleat during a Category 5 hurricane. When the external world is violently chaotic, their internal emotional world is tied to an unmoving pillar.
That is such a vivid image.
This deep psychological anchor provides an inner peace that renders all external threats totally impotent. They embrace the concept of being guaba strangers.
Now, let's expand on that. Being a stranger, because nobody wants to be the weird kid.
True, but it means they accepted that to be deeply righteous in a profoundly corrupt society means you will inevitably be alienated. You will be weird. You will be the outcast. And they made peace with that.
They chose the physical isolation of a dark cave over the spiritual desolation of fitting in with the cool, powerful, but totally corrupt crowd.
And while they are in that physical isolation, the meticulous divine care they receive is just staggering. The verses read like a masterclass in divine engineering.
The details are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
To preserve their physical bodies for over 3 centuries, the actual trajectory of the sun was altered.
Right. It provided sanitizing light to the cave entrance without exposing them to direct, damaging UV rays that would degrade their skin over time.
And their bodies were continuously turned from right to left.
Any medical professional will tell you that is exactly how you prevent pressure ulcers or bed sores in a comatose or paralyzed patient. The continuous turning maintains blood flow and tissue viability.
It's like an ICU in the ancient world.
It really demonstrates an astonishing intimate attention to the physical, biological well-being of the righteous. God didn't just freeze them like ice cubes, he maintained them.
And their eyes were left open. The text says that if you had stumbled upon them, you would have turned and run away in absolute terror.
A built-in security system.
Exactly. It was a terrifying psychological deterrent built right into their slumber, keeping wild animals, thieves, or the king's soldiers away. But amidst all this grand cosmic engineering, altering the sun, manipulating neurology, there is one detail that is so incredibly touching to me. The inclusion of the loyal dog.
Oh, yes. The dog that stretched its paws at the entrance of the cave. It is a permanent, enduring lesson for you about the profound impact of the company you keep.
I love this part so much.
Think about it. This animal is immortalized in sacred, eternal text. Why? Simply because it accompanied righteous people. The principle here is that the blessings, the grace, and the divine protection enjoyed by the pious naturally overflow onto those who associate with them.
The light literally spills over.
Even onto a dog. It violently begs the question for the listener, who are you surrounding yourself with?
Right. If a literal dog can be elevated to eternal remembrance just by hanging out with good people, what does toxic, cynical, or arrogant company do to a human being's heart? It's a heavy thing to sit with.
It is a critical audit of our social circles.
But eventually, the youths wake up. And this brings us to verses 19 through 26 and what we can call the epistemology of time.
They wake up hungry.
They wake up, they rub their eyes, and they are starving. They ask each other, how long have we been asleep? One says a day or part of a day. But very quickly, they demonstrate this beautiful trait, epistemological humility.
This is a crucial intellectual trait, especially today when everyone feels the sudden need to be an absolute expert on everything.
We all have Google degrees now.
Right. When the youths realized their perception of time was fundamentally flawed, they didn't waste energy on protracted philosophical debates. They didn't sit in the cave forming committees to hypothesize about the sun's position or their own biology.
I did start a podcast about it.
Exactly. They swiftly deferred to a higher knowledge. They simply said, your Lord is most knowing of how long you remained. They recognized the strict boundary of their own intellect and immediately shifted to practical, actionable priorities, survival and purity.
Right. They are like, God knows how long we slept, but right now my stomach is completely empty. So they send one of their own down to the city to buy food. And the instructions they give this guy are brilliant.
Very strategic.
They tell him to use extreme tactical prudence. The Arabic word is waliyatalataf. Let him be cautious. Let him be subtle. Let him fly under the radar. I love this because they just experienced the most monumental, physics-defying miracle in human history. But they don't suddenly become reckless.
Exactly. They don't march down to the town square, bang a drum, and announce, "Behold, we are the miraculously preserved men of the cave."
Witness our power.
Right. They maintain that perfect, delicate balance we discussed earlier, ultimate, profound reliance on God, coupled with rigorous, practical, logical human planning. They tell him to sneak in, buy the food, and sneak out.
And the second instruction regarding the food itself is just as important. They don't say, get anything, I don't care, I haven't eaten in 300 years.
No fast food for them.
Nope. They demand the purest food, askataman. Even after waking up from a centuries-long coma, facing extreme distress and hunger, they link physical consumption directly to spiritual purity. They refuse to compromise on the lawfulness, the halal nature of their sustenance.
Because they intuitively understood that what you consume physically has a direct impact on your spiritual state.
Yeah.
You simply cannot maintain a pure, illuminated heart on corrupt, stolen, or unlawful fuel.
So true. Now, historically, their emissary sneaks into the market. He grabs some food, and he tries to pay for it with centuries-old silver coins.
The ultimate giveaway.
The merchant looks at the coin, looks at the kid in the 300-year-old clothing, and the secret is instantly out. The entire city discovers them. And the theological purpose of this discovery is immense.
Right, because by this time the city had totally changed. The tyrannical king was long dead. The society was now composed of believers, but they were deeply divided.
They were arguing over a massive theological concept, the resurrection of the body. They were debating, can God really bring dead, decayed, rotting bodies back to life? Maybe it's just a spiritual resurrection.
It was a huge philosophical crisis for them.
And right in the middle of this fierce debate, these youth walk out of a cave looking like they haven't aged a single day.
It served as undeniable, physical, empirical proof of the resurrection, what the text calls the hour. It proved to that entire society that the Creator who can suspend time, who can halt biological, cellular decay, who can preserve human life in a sealed cave for hundreds of years, can surely, effortlessly, recreate disintegrated human bodies from dust on the Day of Judgment. The debate was completely settled.
And I have to push back here, or rather, I just have to express my immense frustration with human nature. Because right after this profound, universe-altering theological lesson is delivered, look what happens in verse 21.
It goes off the rails.
The youths peacefully pass away. And immediately, almost instantly, the city starts arguing about what to do with their bodies. Let's build a monument over them. No, let's build a massive place of worship. It's maddening. It's like, did you completely miss the point of their entire existence?
You've hit on a deeply tragic historical pattern, and the text explicitly includes this detail as a severe, glaring warning to the reader. Human nature has this dangerous, almost gravitational pull toward the ritualistic veneration of the pious.
We love a good shrine.
We do. We love to fetishize holy sites, we build massive gold dome structures, we kiss the walls, but we completely fail to internalize the actual holy principles those people lived and died for.
Which were about breaking idols.
Exactly. These young men sacrificed their families, their wealth, and their comfort to destroy idol worship. And the immediate societal impulse upon their death is to essentially idolize their graves.
It's the ultimate irony. And the Quran actually leans into this by dismissing a lot of the trivial debates that surrounded this story for centuries. In verse 22, it talks about people arguing over the exact head count.
The numbers game.
Yeah. Were there 3 and the dog was the 4th? Were there 5 and the dog was the 6th? Maybe 7?
The Quran labels all of these highly specific debates as guessing at the unseen. It is a direct command to stop obsessing over pointless historical minutiae that divine wisdom deliberately obscured.
Because it doesn't matter.
The exact number of young men changes absolutely nothing about your life today. What matters is the universal archetype they represent, the relentless, uncompromising struggle for faith against tyranny. That is the lesson you need to extract, because that is a scenario you might actually face.
Which brings us to the ultimate behavioral takeaway from this trial, embedded in verses 23 and 24. It is the absolute submission of the human will. The command to say inshallah if Allah wills whenever you speak of doing anything in the future.
It is vital to understand that saying inshallah is not just some cultural linguistic habit or a polite way of saying maybe.
Like when someone invites you to a party and you say inshallah, meaning you're definitely not going.
Exactly. We use it as an excuse. But theologically, it is a profound, constant spiritual correction. It actively strips the believer of the illusion that they have absolute independent control over time, over outcomes, over their own plans.
It grounds you.
It forces you to acknowledge multiple times a day that your agency is entirely contingent upon divine decree. You plan the meeting, you set the alarm, you book the flight, but God ultimately decides if you take the next breath.
And as a final note on the cave story, verse 25 drops this incredible chronological detail that blew my mind. It says they remained in the cave for 300 years and exceeded by 9. 309 years.
A very specific number.
I looked into this, and the multi-layered accuracy is astounding. 300 solar years is exactly mathematically equivalent to 309 lunar years. It perfectly bridges the two massive calendar systems of human civilization.
It demonstrates the flawless, transcendent precision of the revelation. But notice how it ends. Even with that breathtaking mathematical precision, verse 26 ends with the ultimate epistemological lesson. Defer to absolute knowledge. Say, Allah is most knowing of how long they remain.
So humbling.
It's telling you that no matter how advanced our human records get, no matter how precise our astrophysics or mathematics become, God alone possesses the exact, comprehensive knowledge of all cosmic variables. Our knowledge is a drop. His is the ocean.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. The youths in the cave survived because they had absolutely nothing but their faith. They were stripped of comfort, wealth, and status.
Total deprivation.
But that raises a terrifying inverse question for you, the listener. What happens to your soul when you have absolutely everything? When the struggle isn't a desperate fight for survival, but rather an overwhelming, unyielding, luxurious abundance.
That transitions us perfectly from the trial of faith to the trial of wealth. We are going to explore the parable of the owner of the two gardens, spanning verses 32 to 44.
Let's set the scene for the listener, because this isn't just a guy who planted some nice tomatoes in his backyard. This is an ancient billionaire.
A massive tycoon.
Verses 32 and 33 describe his assets in vivid detail. He has two massive, sprawling vineyards. They're surrounded and protected by towering palm trees with highly cultivated agricultural fields in between.
A perfect estate.
And right through the middle of this estate, a massive river is gushing. But the absolute key detail here is the yield. The text says the gardens brought forth their produce and did not fall short in anything.
That phrase, did not fall short in anything, is the absolute crux of his trial. It created the illusion of ultimate security born out of material perfection.
Because usually, farming is a gamble.
Exactly. Let's think about agriculture normally. It is inherently risky. You have bad seasons. You get locusts, blights, late frosts, massive droughts. That constant variability keeps a farmer humble. It keeps them looking at the sky, literally praying for rain. It keeps them tethered to the reality of their dependence.
But this man...
His gardens had a flawless, continuous maximum yield. The river gushing through the property removed even the hard labor of irrigation. His profit was abundant, guaranteed, and entirely effortless.
And because it was effortless, his psychology undergoes a massive toxic shift.
Yeah.
When you look at this guy's psychology, it's a textbook case of entitlement.
The worst kind.
When you never experience loss, when every single investment turns to gold, you develop a false sense of permanence. You transition from being a grateful, humble beneficiary of a blessing to an arrogant, demanding claimant of a right.
You think you earned it all by yourself.
You start looking in the mirror and thinking, I deserve all this because I am inherently smarter, harder working, and just better than everyone else.
We see the anatomy of this arrogance play out vividly in verses 34 through 36. He turns to his companion, a man of much lesser financial means, but significantly deeper faith, and he openly declares, I am greater than you in wealth and mightier in men.
He just says it to his face.
Look at what has happened. His entire identity has fused with his assets and his social capital. He can no longer separate who he is from what he owns and who works for him.
He is drowning in extreme pride, what the Arabic calls kib. And the text states that this attitude was an injustice to himself. He condemned his own soul because he let the tactile, touchable reality of his sweet grapes and his flowing river completely eclipse the unseen reality of the Creator who actually made the river flow in the first place.
Exactly. And his theological degeneration happens in three rapid, devastating stages. First, he suffers from the delusion of permanence. He looks at his vast empire, the deep roots of his trees, and says, I do not think that this will perish ever.
Ever. He actually says ever.
He honestly, genuinely believes that the fundamental laws of entropy, of decay, and of death simply do not apply to his wealth.
It's so relatable today. I immediately think of these modern Silicon Valley tech billionaires who are literally trying to biohack their way out of dying.
Oh, absolutely.
They are injecting young blood, taking 100 supplements a day, building massive underground luxury bunkers to survive the apocalypse. They actually believe that if they just accumulate enough capital and technology, they can defeat death and entropy.
It is the exact same psychological disease, just with updated technology. The second stage of his degeneration is the denial of accountability.
Because life is too good.
Right. The sensory overload of his paradise, the smell of the fruit, the sound of the water, the total obedience of his servants is so intense he completely rejects the ultimate reality. He says, and I do not think the hour will occur.
The day of judgment.
Yes. The concept of an afterlife, of standing before a judge, becomes totally irrelevant and annoying to him because he has already built his own personal heaven on earth. Why would he want an afterlife when this life is perfect?
And the third stage is what is often called the prosperity fallacy. He says, even if I am returned to my Lord, I will surely find better than this as a return. Let's pause here because this prosperity fallacy is everywhere.
It really is.
It is the insidious, deeply arrogant idea that worldly wealth is empirical proof of divine endorsement. People look at their massive bank accounts, their luxury cars, and they think, well, if I'm rich, God must obviously like me. I am favored. I am blessed.
Therefore, I can do no wrong.
And because God likes me so much here, I'll obviously be a VIP in the afterlife too. It is wild how we map late-stage capitalism directly onto theology.
It is a devastatingly common delusion. We desperately equate net worth with inherent self-worth, and then we project that flawed metric onto divine judgment. But his faithful companion immediately steps in to dismantle this self-sufficiency.
I love this companion. He does not hold back.
In verses 37 and 38, the companion doesn't cower. He delivers a grounding, brutal rebuttal. And notice, he doesn't argue about agricultural economics or market shares. He attacks the wealthy man's ontology.
Ontology meaning the very nature and origin of his existence. The companion says, do you disbelieve in he who created you from dust and then from a sperm drop?
That is a vicious reality check.
It really is. If you were standing in the mud looking at your portfolio and someone said this to you, it would sting. He forces the wealthy man to look past his gold, past his servants, and look back to his literal biological origins. You were inert, dead, lifeless dust. Turab. Then you were a microscopic, fragile, insignificant drop of fluid. Nutfa.
It is designed to strip away the ego entirely. It is the archetypal reminder of human frailty. Furthermore, the companion uses this undeniable biological progression to prove the certainty of the resurrection.
How so?
He is essentially arguing, if the Creator can take dead dust, mix it with water, and turn it into a complex, speaking, arrogant human being standing in a garden, he is certainly mathematically capable of recreating your life after you die and turn back into dust.
And the companion accurately identifies the rich man's true underlying sin. It wasn't just that he was rich. Wealth itself isn't a sin. The sin was a hidden, insidious form of shirka polytheism or idolatry.
But not the kind with statues.
Right. He wasn't bowing down to stone statues of Zeus or Apollo. He was engaging in the idolatry of the self and the idolatry of material causes. The companion violently rejects this worldview, firmly stating his own creed, "He is Allah my Lord, and I do not associate with my Lord anyone."
And this brings us to the core spiritual technology of this entire narrative, found in verse 39. The companion offers the wealthy man the spiritual antidote, the exact linguistic and psychological phrase that protects blessings from turning into curses.
Okay, we need to highlight this.
He tells him he should have entered his garden, looked at his massive wealth, and said, "Mashallah la quwwata illa billah."
Let's really unpack that phrase because I hear people say it all the time, but I want to know the actual mechanism of it. What Allah wield has occurred. There is no power except with Allah. Explain this to me like we are sitting at a coffee shop. How does saying this actually protect you?
Uttering this phrase with conviction is an active renunciation of what scholars call shirk al-asbab, the idolatry of means.
Idolatry of means. Okay, break that down.
Think about the wealthy man. He worshipped the means of his success. He looked at the fertile soil, the flowing river, his strong laborers, his own agricultural genius, and he viewed them as independent, self-sustaining sources of power.
He thought he was the architect of his own universe.
Exactly. Saying, Mashallah la quwwata illa billah takes a sword and severs your ego from your achievement. It forces you to acknowledge that, yes, you may have plowed the field, you may have planted the seeds, you may have built the startup, but the actual efficacy, the growth, the spark of life, the market condition, all of it originates exclusively from divine will.
You have no independent power.
None. It is the ultimate protective mechanism against your own creeping arrogance. It keeps you grateful instead of entitled.
But, true to form, the wealthy man completely ignores the advice. And the companion's warning in verses 40 and 41 comes true with terrifying cinematic speed.
The collapse is instantaneous.
He warns that a calculated calamity from the sky could turn the lush canopy of the garden into Sidon Zalakwan, a smooth, slippery, completely barren wasteland, and the life-giving river, the source of his effortless wealth, could become Garan, deeply sunken, swallowed by the earth, completely irretrievable. And then in verses 42 and 43, the hammer falls.
The text says his wealth was encompassed by ruin. The Arabic phrasing implies total, inescapable 360-degree devastation. There was no corner of his empire left untouched.
None at all.
And it happened swiftly, essentially overnight. It violently demonstrates the suddenness with which divine justice can dismantle human empires. The two foundational pillars of his security, the crop yield and the water source, are utterly annihilated.
The imagery of his reaction is haunting. If you read the verse, it describes him literally wringing his hands, turning them about in absolute crushing despair. Put yourself in his shoes for a second.
It's hard to even imagine.
Picture him standing ankle-deep in the mud. The vines are charred and blackened. The riverbed is dry and cracked. The smell of rotting fruit is in the air. Crushing regret is washing over him as his brain desperately tries to calculate the massive financial and physical infrastructure investments that just vanished into thin air in a matter of hours. All that capital, all that sweat, all that prestige, gone.
And it forces a brutal retroactive epiphany. Surrounded by total material annihilation, stripped of all his illusions, he finally realizes his catastrophic theological error.
He finally gets it.
He cries out, "Oh, I wish I had not associated with my Lord anyone." He realizes his mighty entourage, the security teams, the accountants, the men he bragged about yesterday are completely laughably useless against a decree from the sky.
His network couldn't save him. His wealth managers were powerless. Which leads to the ultimate, inescapable conclusion of this trial in verse 44. True authority, true ultimate protection and patronage, what the Arab calls walaya, belongs exclusively to Allah al-Haq, the true reality.
It is a stark reminder. Material metrics, your bank account, your property portfolio, your stock options, your social media followers, are completely devoid of intrinsic value if they are decoupled from spiritual gratitude.
They mean nothing in the end.
Right. In moments of absolute crisis, in the face of death, and certainly on the day of judgment, all human power instantly dissolves. True security is found strictly in submission to the Creator.
Okay, so we've established that wealth is incredibly fragile, and our control over the physical world is largely an illusion. That's a tough pill to swallow, but I think most of us can eventually rationalize that.
We can accept losing stuff.
Yeah, we can say, fine, the market can crash, I can lose my money, but they can't take away my mind, my intellect, my logic, my ability to reason. That is mine. But what about that? What happens when our human logic, our deep, hardwired sense of rational justice, violently clashes with divine reality?
That is the perfect pivot into our third narrative, the trial of knowledge. We are going to explore the deeply unsettling story of Prophet Musa and Al-Khadir, spanning verses 60 through 82.
Deeply unsettling is right.
I say unsettling because this is arguably one of the most intense and philosophically challenging, brain-breaking narratives in the entire Quran.
And it starts with a massive reality check for a major prophet. Moses is not some uneducated layman. He is a formidable prophet who speaks directly to God. He receives divine revelation.
He is at the peak of human knowledge.
But the catalyst for this entire journey, before verse 60 even begins, is an acknowledgement that even prophetic, humanly grasped knowledge is localized and limited. Historically, scholars note that Musa made a public assertion about being the most knowledgeable person on Earth.
Which was true based on what he knew.
Right. And so God ordains this grueling journey to teach him that true, expansive knowledge requires profound humility. The specific term often used is inkaisar, a total breaking of the intellectual ego.
It establishes the terrifying foundation that human knowledge, no matter how vast, is perpetually constrained by time and space. We only see the present moment and the visible world. To understand deeper cosmic realities, Musa must undertake a rigorous physical and spiritual journey.
He brings a servant along, too.
Yes, he travels with a young servant, Yusha ibn Nun, which demonstrates another key principle. Serving the people of knowledge, what is called kidma, is a prerequisite for your own spiritual elevation.
The destination they're hiking toward is fascinating to me. They're looking for a place called Majma al-Bahrain, the junction of the two seas. Now, while people try to find this on a map, the physical geography is totally secondary to the symbolic meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
It represents the violent meeting point of two massive, crashing epistemological oceans.
Exactly. On one side, you have the ocean of exoteric law, the Sharia. This is the law that governs human actions, societal justice, right and wrong in the visible world. This ocean is represented by Musa.
The black and white law.
Yes. On the other side, it meets the ocean of esoteric divine decree, ilm al-laduni. This is the hidden wisdom of God's unseen, overarching plan, which often totally defies human logic. This ocean is represented by the mysterious figure of Al-Qadr.
And just getting to this meeting point is grueling. Verse 62 specifically mentions the severe physical fatigue Nazaban they suffered. I actually love this detail because it validates the sweat, the headache, and the exhaustion of seeking real knowledge.
You can't just buy it.
You don't just download wisdom into your brain while sitting on a couch. The physical exhaustion is structurally necessary to strip away Musa's ego and prepare his human vessel to actually receive profound, paradigm-shifting truth.
When they finally encounter Al-Qadr in verses 66 through 70, we witness what scholars call adab al-talib, the exquisite, perfect etiquette of the student.
It's beautiful to read.
Pay close attention to how Musa, a formidable prophet who stood down Pharaoh, speaks to his new teacher. He asks permission. May I follow you? He completely relinquishes his authority, and he states his objective clearly. He wants to be taught right guidance, Rushta.
He isn't seeking academic vanity.
No, he doesn't want to debate. He doesn't want another credential. He is seeking spiritual maturation.
But Al-Qadr sets an incredibly harsh, almost impossible boundary. He looks at Musa and tells him point blank, "You will not be able to have patience with me." And then he lays down the absolute rule of engagement. Do not ask me about anything until I make mention of it to you. 0 questions. No real-time intellectual challenges. No asking why.
Which is so hard.
Wait, hold on. If I'm Musa, I'm losing my mind here.
No,
My entire life as a prophet has been about speaking truth to power, demanding justice, and explaining the law. And now I have to just watch in silence. That is excruciating.
It's a total paradigm shift for him.
And so the 3 trials begin, and they immediately test this boundary. Let's start with the first one.
The first trial, the scuttled ship, in verses 71 to 73. They board a boat owned by poor fishermen who generously gave them passage for free. Once they are out at sea, Al-Qadr intentionally takes an axe and damages the boat, tearing out a wooden plank.
Just casually vandalizing it.
Musa is instantly, predictably outraged. He screams, "Have you torn it open to drown its people? You have done a grave thing." From the perspective of human law and basic gratitude, it is a complete violation. It is vandalism and attempted murder.
But the underlying reality, which Kedra explains at the very end of the journey, introduces this incredible concept, the paradox of loss.
Explain that.
Well, there was a tyrannical king up ahead on the river who was forcibly, violently confiscating every single functional, pristine ship for his naval fleet. By putting a minor reparable hole in the fisherman's boat, Kedra made it look defective. He rendered it completely undesirable to the tyrant.
The minor defect saved their entire livelihood. It is a profound theological principle. Apparent painful deprivation can act as a hidden instrument of divine preservation.
I was trying to contextualize this for myself to make it feel real today. Imagine you just spent 3 years saving up to buy your absolute dream car. Brand new, right off a lot, pristine paint job.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You park it outside a cafe. A wise-looking mechanic walks up with a key and violently, aggressively scratches the entire side of the door. Deep, ugly scratches. You'd be furious. You'd call the police. You'd want him arrested.
Right, because all you see is the damage.
Exactly. But what you don't know, what you can't see, is that 2 blocks away, a violent armed carjacking ring is specifically targeting flawless new cars. They walk down your street, they see the massive ugly scratch on your door, they decide it's not worth the effort, and they walk past.
Wow.
That scratch, that infuriating, painful deprivation, actively shielded you from catastrophic harm, maybe even death.
That is a perfect modern translation of the concept. We experience sudden financial losses, sudden illnesses, missed flights, or derailed career plans, and we view them as unmitigated tragedies. We yell at the sky. But true trust, true faith, requires believing that the defect introduced into your life might be the exact, surgically precise thing saving you from an unseen tyrant or disaster.
But if the first trial tested Musa's logic regarding property damage, the second trial shatters his logic regarding human life itself. Verses 74 through 76, the slain youth.
This is the hardest one.
They are walking through a village, they see a young boy playing, and Al-Qitr kills him, unprovoked. Musa is horrified, and rightly so based on the Sharia. He says, have you killed a pure soul for other than having killed a soul? You've done a deplorable, horrific thing.
It is deeply shocking.
This is the part where I had to push back. This is horrifying to read. Why did Qidr have to kill the kid? Couldn't God just change the kid's heart? This is the ultimate confrontation with theodicy, the problem of evil. How do we reconcile a loving, merciful God with the violent death of a child?
It is the most difficult trial of faith to internalize. Qidr's explanation demands that we radically zoom out to the holistic divine perspective, which spans across all of time and deep into eternity.
So what was the unseen reality?
Qidr explains that the boy's parents were deeply, profoundly righteous believers. But this boy, as he grew older, was divinely known to be destined for extreme, violent, tyrannical disbelief, what the Arabic calls taghyun and kufr. He would have dragged his parents into disbelief or oppressed them so violently it would have destroyed their faith and their hereafter.
So it was essentially a spiritual amputation, a surgical removal.
Yes. The divine decree took the child early, before he could commit those crimes, to safeguard the eternal faith of the parents, with the specific promise of substituting him with a child who would be righteous, compassionate, and a true comfort to them.
It's still so heavy.
It demands that true wisdom, hikmah, sometimes requires the active, agonizing suspension of our human judgment when immediate, painful realities violently contradict our emotional sensibilities.
Because human justice is inherently reactive. We can only put someone in jail after they commit a crime. But divine justice is proactive. It encompasses the unseen future, and it prioritizes the eternal salvation of the soul over the temporary worldly pain of grief. It's an incredibly heavy pill to swallow.
It breaks your logic completely.
And then reeling from that, we get to the third trial, verses 77 and 78, the restored wall. They arrive at a town, they're exhausted, thirsty, and starving.
Right.
They politely ask the townsfolk for some basic hospitality, some food.
And the town refuses.
And the townsfolk flat out refuse them. They are hostile, rude, and miserly. But as they are being chased out of town, Qidr sees a wall that is leaning and about to collapse. And he stops and spends hours doing heavy, exhausting manual labor to repair this wall perfectly for free.
Musa just can't take it anymore.
Musa, who is starving, finally breaks. He says, if you wished, you could have taken for it a payment. We could buy food.
Musa is arguing for basic transactional fairness. He's saying, they treated us terribly, they denied us water, why on earth are we doing free manual labor for them?
Makes total sense to me.
But Qidr reveals the hidden reality beneath the wall. Beneath that structure was a buried treasure belonging to 2 vulnerable orphan boys in the city. And the crucial illuminating detail is this phrase, and their father had been righteous.
The generational ripple effect.
Exactly.
The piety, the goodness, the charity of an ancestor acted as a literal spiritual shield that traversed across time, guaranteeing divine protection for those orphans' wealth until they reached maturity. The wall had to be repaired immediately so the miserly, greedy townsfolk wouldn't discover the treasure and steal it from the orphans.
It introduces the profound concept of uncompensated morality. A believer is called to perform acts of benevolence based on divine command and intrinsic morality, completely divorced from how society treats them.
You don't just do good to people who are nice to you.
Right. You don't do good only to those who are good to you. That is just a transaction. You do good because it is right in the eyes of God, even if the beneficiaries are entirely ungrateful.
This marks the abrupt end of their journey together. Qidr says, this is the parting between me and you. But before he disappears, I want to point out an incredible linguistic detail in verse 82. It's about Al-Qigir's masterful etiquette, his idib, in how he attributes these three bizarre actions to God versus himself.
It is deeply subtle but brilliant theology. Look closely at the verbs he uses.
Okay, let's look at the boat first.
For the first trial, causing a flaw in the boat, an apparent damage or defect, Khidr takes personal ownership. He says, "So I intended to cause a defect in it." He attributes the negative appearing action to himself out of respect for God.
Oh, okay.
For the second trial, the boy, a complex, mixed action involving the severe pain of taking a life but ensuring a better, more merciful replacement, he uses a plural pronoun. So we intended.
That's fascinating. And the third?
For the third trial, the pure grace, the absolute providence, and the unadulterated blessing of protecting the orphan's treasure, he attributes it exclusively to the divine. So your Lord intended.
That is profound linguistic precision. And he concludes the entire terrifying journey by saying, "And I did it not of my own accord." None of this was a personal whim. He wasn't a rogue vigilante. It was strict divine revelation.
Yeah, he was just the instrument.
This entire narrative systematically, ruthlessly dismantles the absolute supremacy of human logic. It proves to you and me that our rationalism, while incredibly useful for navigating the visible world, is completely laughably insufficient for comprehending the vast, unseen, multidimensional tapestry of divine decree. We only see one pixel on the screen. God sees the entire masterpiece.
Beautifully said. It's humbling.
Okay, so Al-Qidri operated strictly in the shadows. He utilized esoteric, hidden divine knowledge to perform targeted, secret interventions. But that brings us to a massive global pivot. What does righteous action look like when it is not hidden? What does it look like on the grand geopolitical stage, bathed in sunlight with massive armies and endless budgets?
Enter our fourth and final narrative, the trial of power. We look at the awe-inspiring story of Dhul-Qarnayn, detailed in verses 83 through 98.
Dhul-Qarnayn is this towering historical figure, a global conqueror who traversed the known earth. But it is fascinating what the Quran leaves out. Right at the start, in verse 83, it intentionally minimizes his specific historical and biographical details. It doesn't tell us exactly what year he lived, what his dynastic lineage was, or what his flag looked like.
Because the goal of the text is to elevate him from a mere historical footnote into an eternal, living archetype of righteous leadership.
He's not just a king.
Right. By maintaining a level of historical anonymity, the Quran forces the reader to stop obsessing over historical trivia and focus intently on his methodology of governance, his ethics, and his character traits. He becomes the eternal template for how a human being should handle absolute power.
And how is that power framed?
Yeah.
In verses 84 and 85, it is explicitly established as a divine grant. Indeed, we established him upon the earth. It is tamkeen, global empowerment, but it is treated strictly as a heavy, terrifying trust, an amana. Power is not his personal right. It is a tool meant to be wielded for public welfare.
And notice his methodology. The Quran says, so he followed away. He utilized sabab material means and physical laws. We talked extensively about tawakkul, spiritual reliance, earlier with the youths in the cave.
Yeah.
Dhul-Qarnayn shows us that tawakkul does not mean you do nothing.
Right, he doesn't just meditate.
He doesn't just sit on a golden throne in his capital city, close his eyes, and pray for world peace. He actively deploys his armies, his advanced engineering, his logistics, and his vast wealth to enact physical, tangible justice for the global good.
We see this methodology applied in three distinct, massive global campaigns. First, the Western campaign, verses 86 to 88. He marches his army until he reaches the setting of the sun, and the verse says he found it setting in a spring of dark mud.
Now, let's unpack this term phenomenological perception.
Yeah, please explain this clearly, because some people read this and think the Quran is saying the sun literally shrinks and dives into a mud puddle.
Right, and that is a massive misreading. Phenomenological perception simply means describing a phenomenon exactly as it appears to the human eye from a specific vantage point.
Like an optical illusion, almost.
Imagine standing on a beach at sunset. You would say, the sun sank into the ocean. You don't mean the actual star went underwater. You are describing the optical reality from your horizon. Dhul-Qarnayn reached the western edge of his known landmass, looking out over a dark, murky body of water, and from his perspective, the sun set into it. It's a beautifully poetic description of his physical location, not a statement of objective astrophysics.
Exactly. But what really matters is what he does when he gets there. He encounters a society, and God gives him the total authority to punish them or show goodness. Dul-Qarnayn instantly establishes a foundational, brilliantly just legal code. He says, "As for one who wrongs, we will punish him. But as for one who believes and does righteousness, he will have a reward of paradise, and we will speak to him from our command with ease."
It's the twin, unshakable pillars of a just civilization. Decisive, uncompromising deterrence for the oppressors, and active restoration, reward, and ease for the ethical citizens.
It sounds so simple, but it's so rare.
A good government makes it painful to be bad and incredibly easy for its people to be good. But he adds a crucial, humbling caveat. He delegates the ultimate final judgment to God. He says the oppressor will eventually be returned to his Lord for a terrible punishment.
He recognizes the hard limits of his own jurisdiction. He operates under divine sovereignty, hakimiyah. He punishes the physical crime to maintain societal order, but he leaves the ultimate judgment of the soul to God. Then he pivots his entire military machine. The Eastern Campaign, verses 89 to 91, he travels to the rising of the sun and finds a people who are totally exposed. They have no shelter from the sun, no advanced architecture, no massive cities. They are primitive.
Yeah.
And what does the global conqueror with an advanced, unstoppable military do?
He shows astonishing strategic restraint.
He doesn't conquer them.
He doesn't roll his chariots in and impose his advanced civilization upon them. He doesn't build unwanted infrastructure. He doesn't force them to assimilate into his massive empire. He doesn't tax them. He exercises profound cultural sensitivity, leaving their peaceful way of life totally intact. He demonstrates that true, mature power includes the wisdom to know when not to intervene.
That is so rare in human history. Usually an empire forcefully assimilates every single culture it touches. You must wear our clothes, speak our language, and build our buildings.
It's the standard imperial playbook.
But the true, ultimate test of his leadership comes in the Northern Campaign, verses 92 through 97. He encounters a highly vulnerable population situated between two towering mountains, and they are absolutely terrified. They are being constantly raided, slaughtered, and oppressed by the savage tribes of Gog and Magog, Yajuj and Majuj.
They recognize his massive military and engineering power, and they immediately offer him a deal. They say, "We will pay you a tribute, a massive recurring tax, if you will just build a barrier between us and them." This is a classic, age-old geopolitical transaction, protection for wealth, a protection racket, essentially.
But Dul-Qarnayn utterly refuses their money. In verse 95, he says, "That in which my Lord has established me is better." He demonstrates absolute, uncorrupted financial integrity.
He didn't need their cash.
The state treasury is already sufficient. He refuses to exploit a vulnerable, traumatized people or tax an oppressed society for their basic, fundamental human right to security.
But he doesn't just pull out his checkbook, build the wall for them, and leave. This is where his brilliance as a leader truly shines. He tells them, "Assist me with strength." He commands their direct physical participation in the project.
Let's really dive into the sociology of this because I think it is brilliant.
Really?
He cures their dependency syndrome. Why does free, unconditional aid often destroy a vulnerable society? Because it reinforces their helplessness.
It makes them reliant.
He could have easily ordered his elite engineers to build the barrier while the terrified locals just watched and clapped. But by forcing them to carry the heavy iron blocks, to stack them, to blow the bellows, he fundamentally rewires their psychology.
He gives them agency.
How does physical labor restore dignity? When you build your own shield, you own your survival. He transforms them from passive, shivering, traumatized victims into a resilient, cohesive society capable of defending itself. It's the ultimate teach a man to fish scenario, but applied to macro-level national security.
Furthermore, the verses go into meticulous, almost industrial detail about the construction process itself. He says, "Bring me blocks of iron." He has them stack it between the cliffs. Then he says, "Blow until the iron is white hot." Then he says, "Bring me molten copper to pour over it."
It's intense engineering.
It is a massive, highly sophisticated metallurgical undertaking. Pouring copper over heated iron prevents rusting and creates an incredibly strong, slick alloy.
I love that the text includes this.
It explicitly validates the pursuit of empirical science, engineering, and technological mastery. Islam does not shun technology. It actively demands that technology and science be rigorously pursued, provided that they are governed by ethics and directed toward humanitarian protection and the suppression of evil.
So they build this unprecedented, towering, impenetrable wall. It's a marvel of the ancient world. Gog and Magog cannot scale it because it's too smooth, and they cannot dig through it because it's too thick. The geopolitical crisis is solved. Thousands of lives are saved.
The total victory.
If there was ever a moment in human history for a leader to build a 50-foot marble statue of himself, to mint coins with his face on it, to stroke his ego, this is it. But look at his reaction in verse 98.
It is the instant total annihilation of the ego. The very second the final drop of copper cools and the wall is completed, he deflects all glory away from himself. He doesn't say, look at my brilliant engineering, look at my mighty army.
He attributes it back to God.
He looks at the wall and says, this is a mercy from my Lord. He views his own monumental achievements entirely through the lens of divine grace.
And he goes even further than just being humble.
Yeah.
He immediately contextualizes this massive, solid iron achievement within the timeline of the apocalypse. He says, but when the promise of my Lord comes, he will make it level, and the promise of my Lord is ever true.
He knows it won't last forever.
Let's unpack this concept of eschatological detachment, or Zood. I want to explain this like we're talking to a friend. What does Zood look like in a modern setting?
Zood is often mistranslated as just being poor or living in a cave. But Dhul Qarnayn was the richest, most powerful man on earth. Zood is actually emotional and spiritual detachment from the material world, even while you possess it.
Okay, give me an example.
In a modern context, it's like building a billion-dollar company that employs thousands of people, creates life-saving medical devices, and changes the world. You work 80 hours a week on it. But internally, in your heart, you wouldn't lose a single night of sleep if the entire company burned to the ground tomorrow, because your heart is attached to the creator of the wealth, not the wealth itself.
That is so incredibly hard to do.
It is. Dhul Qarnayn poured maximum physical effort, vast wealth, and genius intellect into building a worldly structure to help people. But his heart remained completely detached. He knows that eventually, at the end of times, God will flatten that mighty iron wall to dust. He recognizes that all empires, all civilizational achievements, all borders, and all iron barriers are temporary. Only the Creator is eternal.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our deep dive today. We've meticulously traced the 4 threads of this blueprint: the cave, the garden, the boat, and the wall. And as we conclude, it becomes blindingly obvious that these aren't just 4 old bedtime stories to tell around a campfire. They form a rigorous, interlocking diagnostic tool for the modern heart.
They truly do, because they arm you against every conceivable vector of attack on your soul.
Let's recap them.
The people of the cave arm you against systemic oppression, teaching you that internal faith and sometimes physical withdrawal can preserve your soul when the state becomes unimaginably toxic. The owner of the 2 gardens arms you against rampant materialism and the subtle, creeping idolatry of trusting your bank account more than God.
Prophet Musa and Al-Qidra arm you against intellectual arrogance, violently proving that human logic is just a tiny, fragile drop in the unfathomable ocean of divine wisdom. And Dhul Qarnayn models exactly how to handle massive power, wealth, and technology without letting your ego devour you and without exploiting the weak.
Together, these 4 narratives function as a comprehensive, holistic immunization protocol. The prophetic tradition explicitly states that reciting and internalizing these stories protects the believer against the ultimate eschatological deception, the Antichrist figure, the Dajjal.
Because he uses those exact same tricks.
Because the Dajjal will attempt to deceive humanity using these exact 4 avenues: brutal religious persecution, overwhelming material temptation, false miracles that confound the intellect, and terrifying global tyrannical power. Surah Al-Kahf is the antidote.
It is a complete, timeless survival kit. And that leads me to a final, really provocative thought that I want to leave you with, something for you to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
Think back to our aerospace stress test analogy.
Yeah.
If these 4 stories represent the ultimate historical trials of the human condition, the trial of faith, the trial of wealth, the trial of knowledge, and the trial of power, consider this terrifying reality. For centuries, a person might face 1, maybe 2 of these trials in an entire lifetime. An ancient farmer might face a drought, but he wouldn't face a global intellectual crisis.
Right, their world was smaller.
But you and I, we are living in the first era in human history where a single person can be forcefully tested by all 4 of these trials simultaneously, every single day, just by scrolling on their smartphone.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
You face the intense psychological pressure to conform your beliefs to the digital mob. You are constantly bombarded by the flawless, manicured, toxic wealth of influencers, making you feel inadequate. You are drowning in a sea of conflicting information and deepfakes that paralyzes your intellect. And you literally wield the unprecedented technological power to reach the globe from your pocket.
It's all 4, all at once.
The stress test isn't ancient history. It isn't theoretical anymore. It is happening to you right now, daily. So the question is, how firm is your anchor?
That is the perfect question to end on.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you with goodness for spending your valuable time listening to us.